everybody. Welcome back to the Digital Adoption Show by Workplace, which is a digital adoption solution for any application on the web. This podcast here is your go-to show for a 360-degree view of digital adoption, learning, and training innovations in companies across the globe. And throughout this podcast, we have luminaries and influencers from the L&D, HR, and employee experience domain to discuss the hot and trending topics right now in this age of digital learning revolution. I'm your host, Gokul Suresh, and I'm the marketing manager at Whatfix. And it's my pleasure today to welcome our guest, Kelly Palmer, the Chief Learning Officer of Degreed. Kelly has had a tremendous career in learning and development so far, working with companies like Sun Microsystems, Yahoo, and LinkedIn in senior leadership in L&D particularly, and the latest as a CL of Degreed. She is on a mission to change the way the world learns. She's a workplace futurist, a world-renowned speaker, innovator, practitioner, and the co-author of the book, The Expertise Economy. Kelly, welcome to the Digital Adoption Show. I'm truly excited to have you here and learn as much as possible about the smartest companies in the world using learning to engage, compete, and succeed.
Well, I have to say it's such a pleasure to be with you here today. So thanks for inviting me.
Glad to have you here. So Kelly, before we move ahead, I'm sure the audience would love to hear more about you. And I'm sure there's plenty more that you could add to my introduction.
So just a little bit about, myself. I've been in Silicon Valley my whole career, and I wasn't always in learning. I actually started out in product development and then moved into corporate strategy. And then I realized that I wasn't really having the impact in the world that I really wanted to have. And I decided to change careers. And I actually moved into corporate learning at that time. I was fortunate enough to be able to make that change within the company at Sun Microsystems where I was working. And I got an opportunity to lead a very large learning organization there. We were actually a revenue generating learning group, I think generating about $500 million a year from learning and consulting. So it was pretty amazing, but it was also my introduction into technology and into the digital space because I think learning had started to go through a paradigm shift there. And from Sun Microsystems, I moved to Yahoo when Oracle bought Sun in 2010. And I spent a couple of years at Yahoo before I was recruited to LinkedIn as their first chief learning officer to start a learning organization from the ground up. And that was an amazing experience. I spent 4 years really scaling the company, going from 2,000 employees to over 11,000 employees, and really putting together the first learning strategy and learning organization there at LinkedIn, with a huge component of that being technology and a new way to learn through a learning experience platform. And then a couple of years ago, I actually met the co-founder and executive chairman of Degreed, David Blake, who's also my co-author of the book, The Expertise Economy, and learned what Degreed was doing and how they were on a mission to change the way the world learns. And I knew I had to be a part of that. And that's when I joined Degreed. And I've been at Degreed for a couple of years now. So that's kind of my career journey.
That's actually incredible, Kelly. And I'm sure that's a dream career path for many. I mean, if at all that happens, come on, Sun Microsystems, VP of Learning at Yahoo, then CLO at LinkedIn. And you mentioned first CLO of LinkedIn, at LinkedIn, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's actually interesting. So what was the drive behind all of this? I mean, this amazing journey so far?
The drive in terms of how I followed my career path.
Yeah, I mean, it's just incredible, and it's just it's a dream career path for many. There's some great companies there, and you've been running and driving a lot more experiments and newer innovations in these companies. So, what kept you going?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think what was really interesting is that even in my first experience of being in learning at Sun Microsystems, there was this, I worked under Carrie Williard, who was the first chief learning officer to be brought into Sun Microsystems. And she really brought in this idea that we could be doing learning differently. And I think that, since it was my first job in leading a corporate learning organization, she really influenced me a lot, realizing that we could be using technology in a variety of ways, and we could be chunking up content into smaller pieces. So even thinking about micro learning back then, and this was back in 2006. So I
Okay.
think I realized early on, how much technology could impact the way we were thinking about learning. And so the journey started there. But interestingly enough, when, I was recruited to Yahoo and I was recruited to LinkedIn. And so in both of those roles, really it was a lot because of my technology background and my product development background. I think that led me to a couple of those positions where they wanted someone who was, one, thinking different about learning, but who also understood a bit about how technology could really intersect with adult education to try to do things new and differently. And one of the main reasons for that is that learning traditionally has been pretty antiquated with a lot of lecture-based classroom type learning. And I think for learning leaders who can think differently about how we can do that and really get employees engaged in the love of learning, that was kind of my mission too. So it so happened that I was recruited by companies who wanted the skills and expertise that I brought to the table there. And I think I was just very fortunate to have those opportunities. And then the opportunity at Degreed was one, where I realized, hey, this is an opportunity. This is a company that's really, really changing the way the whole world could be thinking about learning. And that's when I jumped on that. So I think that that's what drove me, is just this idea that we could be doing this so much better, and that I could be in the middle of that and actually have a pretty big impact on the world.
Yeah, I think your LinkedIn profile actually says that. And, I was actually pretty intrigued about that as well. So Workplace Futurist, that's what it says. And there's so many things happening and constantly changing in any workplace environment, and from innovation to technology to diversity to culture. And the pace of change is too rapid to focus solely on just a few generational differences. And I think that's one of the reasons why, I'm sure it came alongside your entire career, as well as you think that all leaders should also think like a futurist. So Kelly, what is your take on Workplace Futurist? And I'm sure this should add on to the whole drive and the journey so far. Am I right?
Absolutely. So I think when you have a phrase like workplace futurist, it's really a forcing function and a way to say, look, the world of work is changing. That means that the way we think about learning has to change as well. And I think that a lot of companies and a lot of learning organizations have a way to do things. They have a way that they design and develop learning. They have a way that they're delivering learning online and in person to their employees. And I don't think people always want to change or to think about or to really think about dramatic change in terms of what's going to happen in the future. So this idea of a workplace futurist, and you're right, I think all leaders need to think about what's happening in the future. The people who are preparing now for the future are those that are going to be most successful. And it's hard to think out too far in the future, but even thinking 2 or 3 years out and saying, look, the way we're doing things is not really working. What does the future workplace look like in 2 or 3 years? And how does that mean we have to change as a result of that? So we talk a lot about what skills are going to be needed in the future. How is technology impacting? I mean, because we're seeing today technology that's impacting the world of work and learning, but think a few years ahead to the technology that's going to be coming. We have to be ahead of what's coming at us and not be complacent and just work with the tools that we've had. We've got to prepare. And because if you don't prepare, and we talk about this in the book, if you don't prepare and think about the future, it sneaks up on you, and then you realize that you are not in a great competitive advantage for your company and that you're falling behind in terms of innovation. And so it's imperative that we think about how to prepare for the future. And that's the whole idea behind a workplace futurist, is one, to think about all the things that are happening in the future, but also to help push others to think about what's happening in the future and to get ready for that.
So, do you think more of your colleagues in the learning and development space actually, taking over this title as workplace futurist? I'm sure it should be like a revolution, and where people are always forward thinking.
Right. I'm not sure that a lot of people are taking over the title, but I would say that some of the most forward-thinking companies are doing exactly what I just described. They're thinking ahead to prepare their companies for what's coming next so that their companies can be successful. And that is, how can we think about what skills our employees need 2 or 3 years down the line as automation and digitization and acceleration are those trends that are happening in the workplace that are impacting us in such dramatic ways. So those learning leaders that are thinking about those workplace trends, that are thinking about how they can help their companies be successful, I see that happening more and more, and especially the last three years, where you can't open a newspaper or a post on LinkedIn or any online content that's not talking about how companies are thinking about upskilling and reskilling the workforce. It's on the top of mind for business leaders and also for L&D people. And so we're all trying to figure out how to best approach this. And so I'd say a lot of people, although they might not have the title workplace futurist, they are in spirit, thinking about the future and preparing for it.
Makes complete sense, Kelly. And I think, one of the things that I kept seeing in your book, as well as in the speeches that I've heard of you, is about always be learning, right? I'm sure there's a story behind that. And especially since you've been repeating that phrase everywhere, right? I'm sure that, the audience would love to hear about that.
Right. Actually, it ties a bit into what we were just talking about, this idea that people need to be thinking about what skills are going to be most important for the future and to be putting themselves on a path where they can actually be learning those new skills so that they stay relevant in the workplace. So this idea of always be learning actually comes from, a lot of this is the mission behind Degree, the company that I work for, that I'm the chief learning officer for, is that we believe that a college education isn't enough to get you through the entirety of your career. So we know that with how fast things are changing right now, that in order to be ready for what's coming next, you need to always be learning, always be continuously learning new skills. And oftentimes I talk about that in terms of having the skill learning agility, and that's the curiosity and the motivation to be continuously learning and building new skills, thinking about your future. And so those people that are motivated to learn new skills and to always be learning something new are those that are going to be the most successful in the workplace moving forward. And those are also going to be the people that employers are looking for to be the most successful candidates that they're trying to hire, that they're trying to retain at their company. People who are always learning, and if you're hiring, I say this a lot too, if you're a hiring manager and you're wondering whether the candidate is an agile learner, ask them what they learned last week, last month, or last year to get a sense of, are they always learning? And then I think the other piece to this is thinking about broadening our definition of what learning is. I mean, a lot of times people think learning in the corporate world is just about those classroom trainings or maybe the online modules that employers provide. But the reality is that we're learning all the time, every day, from a variety of sources. And that could be by listening to a podcast or going to an event or reading articles online, listening to books online, or a variety of things. And I think we don't always count all of those things as part of our learning journey. And part of what we're doing at Degreed is helping people track all of that learning, whether it be informal learning or formal learning, or even learning on the job in the flow of work. We need to make all that learning count so that people can see, hey, I'm actually learning skills and getting ready for my future.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, always be learning could be a motto. And do you guys have stickers on that? I'm pretty sure, you should get stickers on that.
I'm not sure that we have stickers, but I think that's a great idea. I'll tell our marketing department.
Yeah, right. And You did mention a lot about the book, and I'm assuming that Always Be Learning is one big chunk in the book, and I'm sure you have more stronger cases why the listeners of this podcast should read the book. And to all the people listening to this, so this book is co-written by David Blake, who is a co-founder of Degreed, and Kelly herself. And Kelly, I'd love for you to explain on the takeaways from the book and drive some new readers there.
Right. So the expertise economy came about, as David Blake and I met each other and realized that we both had this passion for helping change the way the world learns, and kind of explaining what the landscape is out there in terms of the new way of learning and the future of work. And so David comes at it as an ed tech entrepreneur. David started Degreed, and he also was at a few other education tech startups. So he comes at it from that mindset. And I came at the topic as a practitioner and being a leader of corporate learning organizations, and actually making some of these changes happen in the corporate world. And so that's how the book came about. We decided to write it together. And really, interestingly enough, it was released in September. And since we released it, more and more, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, people are talking about the urgent need for the workforce for people to upskill and reskill the workforce. And so that was the first part of the book, just helping people realize. And the other thing is that the book was written for business leaders and CEOs to understand how urgent learning is, knowing that HR and L&D people would gravitate towards this topic anyway. And interestingly enough, the PwC does an annual report every year where they talk about what keeps CEOs up at night. And last year, the availability of key skills was number 5 on that list. And in 2019, the availability of key skills is number 3 on what keeps CEOs up at night. And why is that? It's because if their employees don't have the right skills, they can't go after new market opportunities, and they can't innovate. And more and more, we're seeing that companies don't survive as long as they used to, and the average lifespan of a company is something like 15 years. And so CEOs are really taking this to heart, realizing that so much of work is being automated, and AI and other components are factoring into that, especially acceleration and how fast things are moving. So that was the main idea, is getting people to realize this urgent need to upskill and reskill the workforce. And then what we go into in the book is talking about learning cultures, for example, and how learning can be a competitive advantage for any company if they really focus on helping employees develop skills for now and in the future. We talk about the new way that people should think about content, because content is now everywhere and anybody can learn anything from any device anywhere in the world. So how do we take advantage of that? We talk about the science behind how people really learn. And then we get into a whole chapter on choosing the right technology and talking about some of the most innovative technology to help people really learn the skills that they need to in the future. And then we have a couple of chapters on learning analytics, how that's going to be really key to helping people understand how their people are learning and building skills in the future, how companies will understand, but also how learners will understand themselves, how they are learning and building skills. And then finally, we go into this idea of skills being the currency in the expertise economy, meaning, if we really think more about what skills people have rather than just what university they graduated from or what company they work for, if we really think about skills and how that can really help drive what work and what projects people will get in the future, that we can create internal career marketplaces where companies can actually help their talents learn and grow and move around the company to different projects and jobs, and then help people stay at their company longer. And so those are, some of the highlights of the book. We're getting, great reaction from it from both individuals, learning leaders, and business leaders and CEOs. So it's been something that's really resonating with people.
That's brilliant, Kelly, and all the learning and business leaders listening to this podcast. And we'd highly recommend Kelly's book. And Kelly, why don't you tell them where do they actually get hold of the book?
Right. So if it's available on Amazon.com, and it's also available both in hard copy and in Audible and Kindle formats. So if you go to Amazon, and do you have Amazon in your area
Yeah, we do,
by chance?
definitely.
Okay, so that's where you can find it. I believe we also have a website called the expertiseeconomy.com. And if you want to learn more about David and I, or more about the book and the media coverage that we've gotten around that, feel free to check out our website, theexpertiseeconomy.com.
Yes, there you go. And so, Kelly, I was just a bit curious when you were actually talking about upskilling and reskilling. And, in today's world, how can actually businesses execute and adopt and execute upskilling and reskilling to drive digital adoption?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think that that's probably the question that's at the forefront of most people's minds right now, whether you're a business leader or whether you're a learning leader or a CHRO at a company. How do I put together a strategy around upskilling and reskilling the workforce? And that's the other part of the book I didn't really mention, but the subtitle of the expertise economy is how the smartest companies use learning to engage, compete, and succeed. And so what we've done in the book is actually talk about how some of the most forward-thinking companies are putting together strategies to upskill and reskill the workforce. And we also interviewed business leaders like Clayton Christensen and Sal Khan and Todd Rose from the Harvard Mind, Brain, and Education Department around how they see the future of learning. So just a little plug, because there are examples in the book, but I'll tell you that how most people are, how some of the smartest companies are approaching upskilling and reskilling the workforce has to do with really focusing on skills. And that is really asking these basic questions. One is, do the employees at my company have the skills that they need to help the company win in the future? So, for example, we talk about Booz Allen Hamilton and the fact that they realized that a lot of their employees were going to need skills in data analytics, and they didn't have the people with those skills, enough people with those skills today, let alone when they look 2 or 3 years out. This is what I mean about looking into the future and preparing for the future. So they actually put an initiative in place called Data Science 5K, where they are helping to upskill and reskill up to a quarter of their workforce over the next 2 to 3 years. And so they're using Degreed as a technology to help them do that. They're also partnering with General Assembly for some of the in-person hands-on learning, because I want people to understand that there's a difference between just getting knowledge and then actually being able to do something with the knowledge that you gain. And so when we talk about that in the book, and when companies talk about that as a strategy, there are 2 parts to that. It's like, how do you get the knowledge about, for example, data analytics, but then how do you get the learning so that you can actually apply those skills on the job? And that's really the key. And so being able to measure what skills people have when they start, and then being able to assess and to say, okay, in 2019, we had 1,000 people with data analytics skills, but after this program, we now have 2,000 people with data analytics skills at these levels. And to be able to actually quantify that by having a baseline saying, these are the skills our people have, these are the skills our people need, and now we can actually show you when we've actually got people with the skills that we need to be successful moving forward. I think that's the basic idea of how people are approaching the upskilling and reskilling strategies. I think the other part is that you've really got to help employees with guidance around what skills are going to be most critical for your company moving forward. We saw an announcement recently that Amazon is now, I think, putting together or spending $700 million on upskilling and reskilling their workforce. They haven't talked a lot about the the ways in which they're going to do it, but they know that
Mhm.
automation is impacting their company and their employees in big ways. So they want to help their employees that are not going to have jobs anymore because of automation get new skills so that they can work in other parts of Amazon. And Amazon has even said this, that they're also in some cases going to help people get skills so that they can get jobs outside of Amazon. So that's kind of the idea around an upskilling and reskilling strategy.
Makes sense. And, talking about Amazon, that's actually pretty interesting. Do you know any other companies who've been doing this phenomenally well? I think, examples could really help and people to relate and also, adopt to the strategy. So are there any other companies in your mind that has been doing this upskilling and reskilling phenomenally?
Yes, actually, I'd say one of the companies that was one of the first to announce how important it was to upskill and reskill the workforce was AT&T, and T, and their
Hmm.
CEO famously said in the New York Times that all the employees need to be working or learning at least 5 to 10 hours a week on their own, or their skills were going to be obsolete and they weren't necessarily going to have a job moving forward. So it was kind of a stark, blunt comment about the importance of learning all the time to gain the skills that you need. But then he didn't just make that announcement, then they actually invested a lot in helping people get the tools, the technology, and the learning in order to build the skills that they need. So I'd say AT&T is a company that's put a lot of money into reskilling and upskilling. And then Boeing is another company that actually I think announced that they were putting $100 million into upskilling their workforce. And you'll see, like I said, if you look in the news almost every day, you'll see companies that are doing that. The company I'm working very closely with is Unilever, and their CLO, Tim Munden. And Unilever has actually put together a pretty impressive upskilling and reskilling strategy for their company, and actually identifying the skills that employees will need to be successful moving forward at the company level, but also at the functional level. So here's the skills if you're in marketing at Unilever that you're going to need to focus on. And if you're in finance or if you're in IT, these are the skills that are in most demand and that we're going to need you to think about. But in addition to the company giving guidance about what skills are going to be needed in the future, I think some of these forward-looking companies are also empowering their employees to say, look, we're going to give you guidance, but you should also think about your own career aspirations and understand, for example, if your goal in the future is to become a product manager, what are the skills that product managers need most to be successful in the future, and to come up with your own skill plan for what skills you're going to need in order to fulfill your career aspirations. So it's kind of a two-pronged approach where the company's giving guidance for what they're going to need for their company, but they're also empowering their employees to learn the skills that are most valuable for their careers moving forward. And those two pieces converge at some point, which I think is a really great strategy.
I mean, great examples, Kelly. Actually, that brings another question to my mind. There would be a lot of friction involved in getting these plans, streamlined, and I'm sure all these companies would have faced those challenges in some way or the other, right? So, how do you actually tackle those friction? I mean, definitely, it's people process in the end. It's completely mindset related, and making a person to believe that they should be upskilling and reskilling on a continuous basis is something which the company should do, but maybe the individual may not be ready to do it. How do you tackle such a situation?
Yeah, I think that this is the part in the book where we talk about learning cultures and learning as a competitive advantage. I think this idea, I mean, when I gave the example of AT&T's CEO talking to all his employees about the urgent need to be learning new skills and to be learning on your own, the reason that that becomes so important is that I do believe, and L&D has been talking about this for a long time, is that employees should own their own development. And we did a study recently with Degreed and Harvard Business Publishing talking about how the workforce learns. And what we realized is that people are actually spending their own time and their own money, a lot of them, to learn the skills that they need. And they told us that they would even learn more of it if they were given credit for it. So and then there was another article that came out recently that said that managers were more reluctant to think that their employees wanted to build new skills, whereas employees actually were welcoming that challenge. So this idea that we can empower employees, I mean, if you look at the old model of learning, it has been very much command and control. There's a central organization that tells you exactly what you need to learn, when you need to learn it, and employees in some cases were used to that, but we haven't been very successful with that kind of model. So I think moving forward, this idea that we're all in it together, that companies can empower employees and give them guidance, but employees need to actually take some more ownership over their learning and what skills they want to build. And then what you have at the end is this learning culture. So this is where it comes down to, you need to create a learning culture at your company where managers are encouraging employees to learn all the time, every day as part of their job, but employees also feel like they're empowered to learn some of the things that they're really passionate about and that help move their career forward, so that they're motivated to actually want to learn some of these things. So I think that that's part of the key to success when you think about employees wanting to learn new things. Now, part of your question is what do you do about those employees who don't necessarily feel motivated or want to learn new skills? I think the reality is that the workforce of the future is not going to be as tolerant around people who don't have those skills. I think those people are going to find out that their skills are becoming obsolete and that they can't compete in the marketplace moving forward. So I think getting that message out and saying, look, it's in your best interest for you to keep up on your skills all the time, so that one, so that you can help your company, but two, so you can help yourself in your careers and not have your skills become so obsolete you won't have a job anymore. So I think those are the two messages out there.
Perfect. I think that's a place where platforms like Degreed also can help, right? And I believe it's a learning experience platform. And most of the listeners might be familiar with learning management platforms, like, I mean, LMSs, right? So,
Right.
Kelly, so what's the difference? So what's the difference between a learning experience platform and a learning management platform?
Right. And, this goes back to the beginning of our conversation when I talked about this idea that technology can do so much
Yes.
more than what we have been using it for in learning. So for the longest time, for decades, the only technology really that learning organizations have relied on is a learning management system. And a learning management system was really designed for an administrator. And it's actually designed so that you could track compliance training and so that people could register for in-person classroom training. That was the reason LMSs were created in the first place. And so then you could get transcripts of whether people completed compliance training or whether they completed the classroom training, and so that then you could report out to management that yes, these people completed this training. That is an old model, and also we know through the research that's been out there that kind of learning and training just isn't effective. The stats show that $87 billion were spent on learning programs that weren't very effective, and that most, in our recent study with Harvard Business Publishing and Degreed, what we found through that study is that most people believe that that what L&D organizations are providing in that kind of model is really a negative influence on employees. Most employees aren't happy with that. So what Degreed sought to do was to say, how can we use technology to help people learn the way they really want to learn? And so a learning experience platform is not an LMS, and it's not a place where you create content. It's actually the layer on top that helps people build a learning ecosystem. So what Degreed does is it connects to your learning management system. It connects all your content. So if you have paid content or free content or content in your learning management system, Degree can connect all of that, integrate all of that. And so the layer on top of it is the experience that is great for a learner. So if you want to go and you want to see curated content, personalized content, if you want to recommend content to people, that's the layer that Degree provides, and all the content and all the technology is underneath and kind of not exposed to the learner. So the learner gets this great experience. The other thing that Degree does is allow people to get learning what they need when they need it. So we have a browser extension, for example. So if I'm out reading an article about machine learning or talent analytics, I can click on that extension and I can add it to my Degree profile. And this idea about a Degree profile is that you'll have a learning record of everything that you're learning, both from an individual level and at the company level, so that you can see what you're learning and the skills that you're building. And when I mentioned earlier, broadening the definition of learning, so this includes all kinds of learning. It means if you're listening to a podcast, or if you're reading a book, if you're going to an in-person learning, or if you're doing a compliance training, it's all tracked in the learning experience platform, but not through transcripts, but rather through data analytics, showing you what you're learning and what skills you're building. So Degree started out as a way for people to discover all the learning that's out there, to be able to track and measure all the learning. But now what we're doing is helping people map their learning to how they're building skills so they can fuel their careers. And so it's everything that we've been talking about today in terms of upskilling and reskilling. If people understand what skills they have, what skills they need, they can actually track that and measure that through our learning experience platform, Degreed. And so that's where the future is headed in terms of technology, and really focusing on the learner rather than the administrator, and also giving the company a view of what people are doing as well as the individual. So that's in a nutshell.
Awesome. I mean, that's just well put, Kelly. And I'm pretty sure people would definitely check in about learning experience platforms like Degree, more about it. And it's actually an integrated way of learning, and you have a lot of things available to you at the click of your mouse. And I think that's actually quite interesting, Kelly. So you did mention that it can have multiple types of content, let's say podcasts or books or blogs and everything. So how do you actually create such content? And I think that's a massive lot of content there, right? So what is behind all these content creation process?
Well, that's a great question, because the point is that, when I started at Sun Microsystems in the learning organization, as I mentioned earlier, I mean, we used to think we had to create all of our own content. And in some ways we did, but think about what's happened over the last 10 or 15 years. There's an explosion of content. There's so much content out there that people are often overwhelmed. We have a chapter in the book about this as well. It's called Combat Content Overload. And this idea that you can now learn about any topic from any device anywhere in the world at low or no cost. So what that means for L&D professionals is that we don't necessarily have to create all of our own content. Now, it doesn't mean that we don't have to create any content, because I would say, even with my experience at LinkedIn, what were we creating? We were creating content that was specific to LinkedIn that no one else could create. So we created our onboarding. We created some specific management and leadership programs that were specific to LinkedIn. But then we also used all of this great content that's out there. So for example, if you want to learn about data analytics, or if you want to learn about giving great presentation skills, or if you want to learn about negotiating skills, or if you want to learn about tools like any of the Microsoft tools that are out there, or Salesforce, that content, there's so much content out there that learning professionals can leverage, that you don't have to create it by yourself. So either learning leaders are either leveraging the free content that's out there, or they're also buying content libraries, like LinkedIn Learning has the lynda.com content, or Pluralsight for some of the tech content, or you'll have Coursera or edX to get some micro degrees or nano degrees and courseware that way. Some of that is paid content, but a lot of it is free content. So it's this combination that, of all of this content that you provide for your employees that makes it so powerful. And this other idea about a learning experience platform in regards to content is that there's two ways that people get content within Degree. One is that we use machine learning to actually understand, here's an employee that says they're interested in learning more about data analytics. So the machine learning within Degree will start offering up content to a learner based on what they said that they wanted to learn. So think about Spotify for music. A lot of what Degree does is offer up learning based on what it knows you want to learn. And then the second thing is that then you can actually curate content. You can actually say, look, here's an article about data analytics here and a podcast and a video over here. I'm going to curate all the best content about data analytics, and I'm going to serve it up to you in a pathway. And that can be done either by the L&D organization or by subject matter experts. And so you have a lot of content pathways based on different topics and different areas that people want to learn about. And so I'd say content now, just like technology, you need to think about it differently. You need to think about a content strategy in a whole new way. And so I think that the role of the chief learning officer or learning leaders is becoming more complex, and that we need to understand what that means, and that there's a technology component and a content component, and several things, and the data analytics component, and all those things converge to make up your learning strategy. So hopefully that answers your question around content, but it's a whole different category now.
I know. I'm sure that a totally separate podcast can be done just on this part, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Right. I think, Kelly, you totally justify the whole workplace futurist bit as well. I'm really amazed by the ideas that we've had in the podcast so far. So, before I wind up the podcast, I have two more questions that I ask all the guests in the podcast. So the first one here is, as an influencer, there are many people who actually inspires you. So who would actually be on the top of that list?
Yeah, I have two answers to that right now. And I'd say the person who's inspired me the most over the last 3 years has been David Blake, my co-author of the book and the co-founder of Degree, because I met a guy who is so passionate about learning that he poured his whole life and his passion into building this company to really help people change the way they learn. And I don't know that I've seen someone with so much passion around changing. And it's not just about building a company, which is definitely part of it, but really David's passion goes beyond that. It's around really trying to make an impact in the world, helping everybody realize that there are different ways to get expertise, and that it's not always about spending a lot of money on a college degree, even though you might also do that, but it's about giving everybody the opportunity to learn what they need in order to get further in their careers or to realize their life's ambitions. So I'd say David has really influenced me and inspired me a lot around this whole notion of learning. Mm-hmm. And then I'd say from a more well-known person, I'd say Michelle Obama is another person that's influenced me a lot. Again, someone who's inspired me to realize that you can take your passions and actually apply them and make great things happen. So I'd say those two people.
Yeah, that's just perfect. And I have one more question for you before we go. So that's like, so what is the one word or phrase that comes to your mind about digital transformation and adoption?
Yeah, the one word that comes to mind for me is journey. And the reason I say that is that I believe that we're all on a journey together in this quest to help the world learn, and actually I believe learning has the power to change lives and transform the world. And so we're on this journey together. And I would say if you're a learning leader out there, or if you're a business leader, that we're all on a journey together, and people are at different parts of that journey, and that we'll get there. But our goal is to always help each other. One of the things that I love so much about the learning industry is that it does feel like we're all in this together, and that we're trying to help each other on this journey to move from kind of these older, antiquated models of learning into this new world of work and learning. And that everybody I meet along this journey is willing to help others succeed on their journey. So that's pretty cool. I like that a lot. So I would leave it with that.
I mean, that's beautifully put, and it was an incredible thing actually today. You also shared your whole journey, and I'm sure so much of different learning and takeaways from all the different questions that you answered. And Kelly, it's really been incredible, and I wanted to thank you for joining us on this podcast. And it's definitely one of the amazing episodes that we have in this season.
Thank you, Gokul. It's been such a great pleasure to be with you today. Thanks for asking me.
And so for all the listeners who are, who might have some questions, it would be great if you could actually share how they could reach out to you.
Yes. Again, I'd like to mention the expertiseeconomy.com is a place where you can learn more about myself, David, and the book, and also contact us there. You can always reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I'm also at kelly@degree.com. So any of those ways, I'd love to hear from you.
Perfect. So that's it, guys. So last but not the least, if you are looking for a digital adoption solution to streamline your digital adoption, then also do check out whatfix.com. We have something really interesting for you. And Kelly, once again, thank you for this podcast, and stay tuned to the next episode of Digital Adoption Show for some great content and some incredible speakers. So this is Gokul signing off for the day. Have a great one.